Today's story has it all: ingenuity, youth empowerment, entrepreneurship, technological innovation, charity, and more. My guest today is Nasiha Israul, the founder of Canary Academy, an online learning platform for homeschoolers that provides curriculum curation, learning tools, coaching, and community engagement for homeschooling families across the U.S. Nasiha started in 2017 as a 15-year-old homeschooler, trying to make her own family's homeschooling experience easier and more efficient. She officially launched the organization as a nonprofit in 2021. Now at age 20 and about to graduate from college this year with a bachelor's degree in early childhood education, Nasiha continues to lead and grow Canary Academy from her home in Virginia, with a specific focus on expanding access to homeschooling resources for low-income families. Nasiha Israul, welcome to the Liberated Podcast.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. It was wonderful to meet you in person recently when I visited the Richmond, Virginia area, and now to have you on the podcast so more people can hear your incredibly inspiring story. So let's start really from the beginning. I mean, it's sort of that old saying of, invention is the mother of necessity, or right? Is that how it goes?
Necessity, the mother of invention.
Necessity is the mother of invention, right? And so that was pretty much your story around creating Canary Academy. You had been homeschooled your whole life, as well as your younger brother, and your mother ended up taking a full-time job to help support the family, and yet wanted to continue homeschooling. And you realized that that was a heavy lift, and could there
Yes.
be a way to do that easier and more efficiently? And so you created that. So tell us a little bit about that story back when you were 20, back in 2017 when you were 15.
Yes. So I had always enjoyed the homeschooling process. You know, my parents took on more of the eclectic style of home education where they would kind of mix in a little bit of all the different styles out there. And it would mix from kitchen table learning all the way to going out to the park and looking up in the sky. What do you see? Identify the clouds, that type of stuff. And then as we got older and our financial needs changed a bit, my mom had decided to go back to work because she had left the workforce to homeschool us when we were younger. And so my dad was already working, and then my mom started working. And, that was a big change because that same year, my brother was entering middle school and I was entering high school. So we had a lot of change going on that year. And so I remember just sitting down with her and was like, okay, so what's the game plan? Because we're entering these two different stages of life and you're starting back work. So how are we gonna do this? And my mom really wanted to continue homeschooling. And so we worked together. And so for that first year, we ended up making our own schedules and then getting them approved by my mom, which was our first like rite of passage for independence kind of thing for us, because our mom up until this point had been like telling us, here's what you're going to do, here's where you're going to get up, here's the list of schoolwork that you need to get knocked out. This was the first year she was like, I'm giving y'all the freedom to choose how you want to get this work accomplished. And I really saw from that point that it gave me an entirely new sense of freedom in education, because I got to decide what I like to do, what my electives would be. This is high school, so you get to choose all the fun courses. And at that same time, my brother was just transitioning from elementary school. So while I was like, this is awesome, my brother was more so like, I need more structure. I like freedom, but I like it within a structure. I want to know what I'm doing. And so while I adjusted very well, my brother, while he adjusted, I had to coach him a lot more along. And so as my mom settled into work and we settled into our new grades, my brother had some subject matters that he was struggling with still. And so I ended up taking on the role of like sister/tutor. So early on, we would go to the office with our mom because it was like a homeschool friendly work environment. So we could actually go there. There was a room for homeschooling in the office. And we would go there and study while our mom worked on the floor. And it was just so cool because I remember sitting back there and just helping my brother with his homework, just going through the books, just saying, here's how this is done, because I'd already learned the content from the previous years. And he loved it. And it was something that was really fun. We would make like models of molecules for science. And we would do that out of like cake pops and like cereal and all sorts of cool stuff. Like, here's where this goes. This is an electron. And eventually I realized that that was the style of learning that he liked the best. And so I talked with my mom and I was like, well, I've gotten my schedule down. I know what I'm doing and I have a lot of free time in the afternoon because I like knocking out my work early. So could I maybe like start helping with, teaching him while you're working? And she welcomed it. She was like, of course. Because at that time I was like fascinated with the field of education and I wanted to kind of start gaining experience in teaching. And so I would go into our space of learning and I would start bringing in books, bringing in videos and activities for my brother to do. And that's essentially where it started, was me just working as that tutor assistant while my mom was working to be able to support him. And eventually I started to see that if I could bottle this and put it online for my brother to do, then I could automate it, so it would still be me being able to help him, but it would already be set up week in advance what he needed to do and how this was going to play out. And so I started researching online all the different LMS learning management systems that were out there. I had no experience of how to build curriculum. I just looked at what my online courses look like and went from there. And as I started to learn more, I started able to build out this virtual curriculum for my brother. And eventually it became a full course. And then when he liked it so much, it became 2 courses and then 3 courses. And it really started from there. So essentially that's pretty much how it started, my inspiration for the organization.
Oh, just such a great origin story. And then at some point, you realized that you were on to something, that this potentially could be bigger than just a support system tool for your brother's learning, that this could actually be beneficial to homeschooling families beyond your home. And you entered a local business competition. You kind of started to expose your idea to a broader audience. Tell us about that early experience.
Yes, that was my favorite year. I always remember it's the year 2020. And I know during that year, that was when we had first heard about the pandemic and those types of things. But I remember as we were home and, a lot of things had changed by that time. My mom had started remote work. And so we were at home, and I remember just sitting there going, I would love to be able to help more kids with the curriculum that I'm doing, because I'm starting to see everybody talking about school at home. And we're starting to see like all the different school districts around us create these different types of at-home learning plans. And I'm looking like, I think I can help. And but it wasn't something that I had really thought about doing for anyone more than my friends. So local moms had contacted me from our community and was like, hey, I hear what you're doing with your brother. You think you could make my child a class on, let's say, third grade science? And I'll be like, sure, because it was experience for me. And the more I would build, the more I would get feedback, the more I would get like user testing to kind of see whether the structure had worked. And it did for a lot of students that I'd helped. And mainly it was just local friends. And then the latter end of 2020 came. I had just graduated from high school and had been taking some college classes through dual enrollment, and I'd finished those. And I was really interested in education. At that point, I had decided I wanted to be an educator. And so I'm looking like, well, what can I do, as a career choice within education? Because, the major one is you're going to be a public school teacher, you're going to go into a school and you're going to teach physically in a classroom. And that was my initial goal until the latter end of 2020, when virtual learning like blew up. And I started to see that it became a more viable career option for a lot of people, and it was actually in high demand. But still, that was something that I was like, I'll pursue, after college, or I may do it on the side, while I'm pursuing college. And so I enrolled in college that fall. And at the same time, I see this announcement in my honor society. It's called the National Society of High School Scholars. It's one of the only national honor societies for homeschool high school students. And I had just gotten membership earlier that year. And they put out this plan that said anyone with a world-changing business idea can come and apply to be able to have their idea put on a national stage in front of business leaders who will judge your idea, and you can walk away with $10,000 if you win. And I was like, well, what business idea do I have that I could, put into this competition? And it never really crossed my mind that I already had one until after I started like thinking it over and like, wait a minute, this little hobby that I had been doing on the side here could actually be a business idea. And so with no previous knowledge of how to develop a business plan, because they said you need a business plan, you need like a prototype, you need all this stuff, show us what you're doing. And so I put together like a really interesting commercial. I was young. I was just talking over slides of my product, what I'd built. I made a business plan off of a template online. I like looked up how do you pitch. I watched Shark Tank. That was my favorite show, and like figured out how do business leaders like pitch their idea in a few minutes. And by the end, I had been told that I'd been selected. And it's a national program, and you're competing against adults and kids. So it's not just teenagers. At that point, it was educators and teenagers from across the United States and the world, because we actually had a winner in the competition from Australia. So yeah, it was a pretty wide scaled project, but I ended up being selected as one of the few participants for that event. And so then came the elimination rounds where I had to develop a pitch deck and like actually talk about it live to judges and be grilled on questions relating to my business strategy by people who had worked in this field already. And so I made it through one elimination round, then two, then three, and I was on to pitching to a virtual audience of hundreds of people through Zoom. And by the end of that, they announced me as one of the 10 winners online live at that event that day. So that was around October, November of 2020.
Oh, just amazing. And you got some publicity from that. Some of the local papers in Virginia covered your story, and that must have then prompted you to launch Canary Academy as an established nonprofit, which you did in 2021. You also received a micro grant from the Vela Education Fund, which helps to promote and support entrepreneurs who are building out of system education solutions. So you really start to kind of ramp up the organization. And I'm curious, over the last couple of years since kind of the launch in 2020 to now, how has your vision and the kind of structure of the organization evolved?
Yes. So in the very beginning, I thought it was just going to be a regular LLC, just a kind of, business that was one step up from a sole proprietorship to kind of get me off the ground. But as I started doing the trainings for the pitch competition and I started talking with the educational professionals and mentors in that space, I started realizing how fascinating the nonprofit world was. I'd always heard of it, but it was kind of this like out of sight, out of mind, that's the types of organizations you see in your community, but you'll never run, until I realized that I could make my business a nonprofit and what that meant. Because, people often hear about nonprofits, but the inner workings are kind of just not something that's often talked about. And so that's the first pivot, was when I first got started. I was like, I'll just make this an LLC or a regular corporation and it'll be a for-profit, until after I realized the intricacies of the nonprofit world and how social impact works and how you can be a charitable purpose and still fulfill your mission in life that you would like to do. The second pivot, I think, was when we started the EHEP program, or the Equity in Home Education program, which was piloted in 2021. And what I'd realized is our initial focus was curriculum. We wanted to be the best of the best when it came to developing virtual learning options for children. And we were going to be a K-5 to K-8 organization. As we started to see the demand rise and we got featured in the different news articles and families started reaching out for assistance, I started to realize that there was this huge gap in access to technology to even homeschool. So there's this entire this entire need that was not being reached at the time for laptops and hotspots. Some people were not even able to have internet. And I realized, how can I be a nonprofit that's pushing for our curriculum to be adopted by families who want that learning option that we had created, and then they don't have the tools needed to be able to use the curriculum? That was counterintuitive to me. So we first launched EHEP in 2021 as a pilot. We helped about 30 families across the US with laptops, and that's what our micro grant from Vela was for. And we piloted that idea and it took off. And families were like, this is what I needed. I had never even known there were people out here to help me like this, you know? And the feedback that we got from that pilot was just so crucial to the development of our organization. And we ended up running a full scale model of EHEP that following year in 2022. And then again, we are launching EHEP next month as the widest operation we've ever done, helping. Our goal is to give out 1,000 kits this year in multiple locations across the US to families. And that's the biggest part of EHEP we've ever done. So essentially, I would say those are the main ways in which we've pivoted and grown as an organization.
Yeah, the nonprofit focus and then the equity in home education. So, Nasia, let's dig into that latter piece a little bit more. How did you come to the realization that there were families who really wanted to homeschool but had these real structural challenges around access to technology and resources that would make it difficult for them to access an online program like yours? Like, where did that come from for you?
Yeah, so it initially started when we had some coaching calls opened up for families. And I had started really getting into the area of saying, hey, I'm not only going to build this curriculum for you, but our main focus is that's customizable and personalized to you. So I'm going to get on a call with you and I'm going to sit down and hear your needs. Then I'm going to develop a program based around your family's specific needs and desires and goals. And when that started, families loved that idea because there's never been a curriculum where you sit down with the client and say, how would you like me to build this online course, right? And so families were like, well, we need this and we need that. And over time, as we started expanding our offerings, we started hearing more and more about families who didn't have access to more than one computer or whose internet was really spotty, so they couldn't get onto classes. And we started seeing, as we did more like surveys and things, how is the pandemic affecting your homeschooling? How can we help? And we constantly saw financial support. We constantly saw, I need money to buy a printer. I need money to buy a laptop. My internet is not that great. And all those things are a part of digital literacy, digital equity. And another thing that I saw was that when we started doing our online classes, a lot of people still didn't know how to use the digital technology because it was new to everyone. So things like Nearpod and vocabulary and Zoom and Google Meets, people were still like, how do I find the mute button, you know? And I was like, well, that's a part of digital literacy and digital equity, because if we don't know how to use these tools, then we can't adapt them and pull them in to make homeschooling more affordable and equitable for families as well. And so I started taking on kind of the digital literacy coaching part where I'd get on and show people how to use technology and programs. And eventually I just started to see that there was this wider need. And that's when we first started the pilot of the program.
So tell us a little bit more about these kits. Your goal is to distribute 1,000 kits
Yes.
this year to low-income families who don't have access to these technologies. And you're also teaming up with local community-based organizations to identify needs. I wonder if you can share a little bit more insights in both of those areas.
Yes. So the program this year is focusing more on hubs, which is little centers of collaboration between our national organization and local partners that can identify the individual and unique needs of families in local communities. Because what we'd been doing in previous years is we had been going out and finding all of the families who needed help and putting out ads everywhere we could and having mom bloggers post about what we were doing in different communities. And we realized that this was a lot of work for our team internally. Last year, I had like hundreds of boxes in our living room because we were trying to pack everything with our small team and ship them out to all the families across the US. And we were either going to transition to a distribution center where we still went and did that, or we would have to outsource. And so the more I developed the strategy, the more I realized, because we tested it out last year with 1 to 2 locations, if I can find community partners in cities where there's already high demand from the previous years of our program, then we can expand access there and make it even more accessible for families who per se might not be able to pay for shipping or might not have places that can receive boxes and packages where they can go and actually get the kits physically from the partner locations. And so now we have about 5 hubs in different parts of the US. We're partnering with an organization in Richmond, Virginia, an organization in Houston, Texas, one in Atlanta, Georgia, and then one in Florida. And we've got individual homeschooling moms from our own network who are taking kids and giving them out to the community groups that they're a part of as well. And what this does is it makes it where, A, we can send aid that's relative to the community, because oftentimes just sending out a laptop and school supplies generically will help. But if we really want to tailor it, we call it hyper localization, then we want to make sure that families, if they need a specific tablet, if they need printers, there needs to be more printers in one community than laptops. We're not just going to divvy things up based off of our inventory. We're actually going to listen to the needs of community partners and see what are the needs looking like in your community. And so that's pretty much how the program has changed and adjusted this year to work with partner hubs.
Oh, just so great. And so you have now these families able to access technology and supplies. And that's the kind of hardware piece or the tangible part of learning. But then there's also the software piece, which is the platform that you've created that is this kind of curation of curriculum and very personalized. You also really focus on community building and community engagement with homeschooling families across the country. I wonder, if someone was interested in becoming and joining Canary Academy online and sort of becoming a part of that community, what would they find there? What sort of assistance and resources do you offer?
Yes. So essentially, we are a one-stop shop for homeschooling. So we have built a platform and a community base that allows families, when they join for membership, to be able to not only give back to the community, because the funding from those memberships goes directly into investing in our software for the program, and individual families who can't afford membership to be able to gain access to the same services. It also would provide virtual classes that are tailored to the needs of each student. So we have teachers who are trained in the Canary Way, which is our developed learning methodology that really focuses on project-based individualized learning, where teachers will meet with them once or twice a week and go over work together based off student discussion. Students lead it, the teachers just facilitate. And then
these are experienced hired teachers. I think it's
yes.
important to note that you've hired to be a part of this organization and really customize the learning. Yeah.
Yes, we have. And it's also individual students, because we are a primarily youth-led organization. We wanted to keep to the heart of that. So in our classes, you'll also find student-led clubs and classes. We're actually launching a program this week that's called the Young Educators Fellowship. And it really shows students from our own community and abroad what homeschooling looks like and what our learning methodology looks like, and trains them to be able to be the next generation of educators and gain access to teaching their own classes for the semester. So everyone's really excited about that one. But yes, you'll find classes, clubs, virtual tutoring in different languages and subject matter. I teach certain classes like social studies. In addition, you'll find a lot of discounts from our partners on other resources that we may not be able to provide, like textbooks and individualized tutoring for math and science, links to resources from our partners, and lists that we've curated with the community to be able to show you, here's where you can get like an entire curriculum completely for free. Here's this website that has high school level coursework, and then also coaching. So every few months we host community coaching calls where I or one of our fellow coaches gets on and shares homeschool experience and tips, and then families can come on and ask questions. We also do that one-on-one on demand. So families can contact me or another coach and actually reach out and say, hey, I'm having difficulty helping my kid with reading. I need help. What are the resources that are out there? And I can sit down with them and show them that. So it's really about helping families and especially students take ownership of their educational pathways. And that's really how we define it in our community.
I love it. So great. So could you tell us a little bit more about this community that you've facilitated and cultivated? Tell us about their demographics, their geography, socioeconomic status. Who is in the Canary Academy community at this point?
Yes. So we've got families from a variety of backgrounds, all the way from lower income families from underrepresented groups and demographics, all the way to families who are just new to homeschooling and have no idea where to start. There are families who have come from different countries and cultural backgrounds who are looking to be able to homeschool. And then there are families who come from different religious backgrounds, that are looking to be able to homeschool. We're really an entire community, like melting pot or salad of so many different homeschoolers from different backgrounds who all share that common interest in individualized, personalized education. And essentially, our main focus is helping families trade knowledge. And that's one of our main focuses in our community. And that's why it's built to the point where it is because we have a community library where people can come in and post their own information or send out chats of, hey, this is what book I purchased for my child, or this is what book I found at the library. I think y'all would benefit from it. And anytime that there are questions, people can come and ask those questions in the community setting or through a private DM. And it's a private platform. It is not a major social media based platform. It is an individual software, and families are able to access it through the app or online. Yeah, it's all in one, all inclusive.
And are you finding that this community consists mostly of kind of long-term veteran homeschoolers, or are they more newcomers, especially over the past few years of education disruption? What's the mix there?
It is a even mix. You'll get, because we have everyone put up a profile of like, how long have you been homeschooling and what are your strengths and what are the things you think you could grow in? And we've seen a mixed answer in every single profile, where some parents will be like, I've been homeschooling for, 20 years. Whereas another person might come in and say, I just started homeschooling during the pandemic and have no idea where to start. And so that's where that knowledge sharing really comes in handy, because then everyone's able to pool that knowledge and support everyone, because everyone can always learn more from each other.
And what are some of their biggest motivators, these families? Why are they choosing an alternative to conventional schooling?
Yes, a lot of them have children who are neurodivergent. So that's one thing, is that a lot of them are special needs, and they weren't getting the care and education support that they needed in public school. And so families have told me over and over, I pulled them because I wanted to be able to make sure they were actually learning and getting that care they needed. It was causing them anxiety. It was causing them all sorts of emotional disturbance, from peer pressure to bullying, other things. And so a lot of families left public school for that reason and came to homeschooling. Other families left because they realized that what they wanted to be taught was not being taught in public schools, and the different cultural backgrounds that they held dear was not being represented in the public education setting. And many just came because they were curious. During the pandemic, they got a taste of what homeschooling could look like because they did not like the school at home system and decided to homeschool that year. And they realized how much their child flourished and they wanted to continue it. So those are kind of a few of the narratives that we've experienced within our community members.
I just want to say congratulations on what you've built. I mean, I'm sure you hear this a lot, but it's just so remarkable and obviously so needed, and families are flocking to it. So, congratulations on this incredible accomplishment that seems to really tie in with your interests and passions in education and technology. As I mentioned, you're now graduating college with a degree in early childhood education. What's next for you, and what's next for Canary Academy?
Yes, one of my favorite questions. What's next for me is I plan to go into education policy. That's one of my goals, because I really am fascinated with the inner workings of crafting policy that will help people understand what homeschooling is, because I still think there's a huge educational opportunity for the general public here. Because there's more of an openness to homeschooling now than there was, let's say, 5 to 10 years ago. And I definitely want to be a part of that. I think another thing is advocating for education equity, because I think oftentimes when people think of education equity, they think of, oh, we need to make sure that the public schools are more accessible for people and more high quality and more funded. And I agree with that. But I also think that education equity in the nation should be embracing the other forms of education that are out there and allowing families from all socioeconomic backgrounds to equally access them, to make that choice and decision. And so I would like to be a part of developing policy for that and creating and crafting policy proposals that will help with that. As for the future of Canary Academy, I think it runs along the same vein. I think that I want to continue to lead it and make it that advocacy organization that it can be and that I foresee. I also believe that our strengthening ties with individual communities will really help us grow our vision, because even if we had individual chapters of Canary Academy, in physical locations across the US, and really continuing to build those connections with community is really our main focus as we scale. And I hope to see EHEP replicated in cities across the US and even across the world, because I think that this is one of the ways in which we can advocate for homeschooling, is through making sure that everyone has equal access to the tools needed to be able to homeschool effectively and easily. So those are the goals.
Oh, such great goals. And of course, much of my work and the work that I love to do is this intersection of education, entrepreneurship, and policy. So I'm thrilled to see that you're also interested in that too. I know it's sort of earlier in your career, but what do you see as some of the most promising education policies that would expand equitable access to these options?
Yes, I am one for supporting the tax credit legislation for homeschoolers. I think that would be highly beneficial, especially for lower income homeschoolers, to be able to get tax credit back. I also think the ESAs that have been coming out in recent years, I think that is something that would be helpful depending on how it's done, because I know every piece of legislation has its own, kinks. But overall, I think those ideas are promising. And I think if they're worked on a little bit more with more input from the homeschool community, I think that they can become legislation that allows and opens doors for more homeschooling and more alternative education options to arise and be recognized.
Fully agree. Nasia, if my listeners and viewers want to learn more about you, learn more about Canary Academy, support your nonprofit efforts to bridge that divide that sometimes exists within homeschooling families, particularly low-income homeschooling families who may not have equitable access to technology, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
Yes. So the best way is through our website at www.canaryacademyonline.org. That is the best way. And there you'll find our team email, phone number, and a lot of information about us. And that is one of the best ways to be able to reach out if you have questions. There's also a donation button there on the page as well if you wanted to support our mission. And you can actually choose, where your donation is going, whether it's the EHEP program or our student service learning program. There's so many programs that we're doing for the homeschool community. So that would be the best way to be able to reach out.
Well, I am so excited to follow your journey and see what more and greater impact Canary Academy has, as well as hopefully have the opportunity to work with you in ed policy circles in the coming years. Just really, again, so thrilled with your success and wish you the best. Nasia Israel, thank you again for being on the Liberated podcast.
Thank you.